Hey everyone, I'm rather incoherent, and as you may have been able to guess by part 34 being titled Finale, I'm calling the campaign early. That's not to say I'm throwing in the towel, it's to say that I think we're going to win, and it's such an extreme likelihood of winning that it makes the game less fun. And while normally when we're far ahead in the game I would want to grind it out and actually finish it, because usually it's still fun even if it's not very likely to lose. In this case, I feel like the way we got ahead sort of taints it, because I think most of the reason we're snowballing so quickly and so hard is due to bad mod setup on my part. So I want to talk about what went wrong in my setup and what was pushing us so much further ahead of where we should have been. Before I get into that though, I would like to say, I feel like Doll Eyes not having legs in this image is foreshadowing her career with XCOM. But there are a couple of major issues that caused us to get really far ahead in the campaign, and especially in these early missions with these soldiers who are what, corporals, sergeants at absolute most. The vast majority of these early missions we have terrible soldiers, squaddies and corporals whose aim is garbage, whose ability list is pretty short, and grenades are really valuable on those soldiers. I was running extra utility slot, which just gives you an extra utility slot on every type of armor at every tier in the game. And in the late game, that does really good stuff. It lets you make a bunch of decisions that you normally wouldn't have access to, and it's not making you that much more powerful, but it is making the game substantially more complicated, and I like that a lot. In the early game, though, there's no decision making. There's no items to distribute in those slots. And with grenades not being unique, it just gives everyone an extra grenade. And when your soldiers are trash, and they all have twice as many grenades, and their net value was basically one grenade before, they're nearly twice as good now. And that's hyperbole, obviously, but it was a huge swing in our favor, and I'm using different mods to get that later in the game in my next campaign. I've got something called Powered Armor Tactical Rigging, which is a workshop project for Tier 3 armors to get an extra item slot, and in the early game, we don't have to wait till Predator for the second armor slot anyway, because when you get Alien Alloy Integration, that's going to give you a second item slot on Kevlar as well. So in the end, we really just don't need the utility slot mod anyway. All it really serves to do in my setup is grossly imbalance the early game. Which is only exacerbated by having a shell-shocked Chosen, right? Because now I have 33% more people than normal with twice as many grenades as normal. Normally a shell-shocked Chosen has to watch out for 6 grenades, mine had to watch out for 16. It's a little bit different. And on the subject of the Chosen, I'm going to be mentioning a lot of changes my mod setup made. That video went live yesterday. The Chosen needed to have more health. I have 33% more men. Bosses are meant to be fought by your whole team at once, pretty much. So bosses should have, maybe not 33%, but more health, definitely more. So I've given all of the rulers in Chosen 20 to 33% health buffs as well. Another change I made in my mod setup that I don't see people talk about a lot is when you drastically increase the number of soldiers you have on your side, you have to increase the number of enemies to compensate. That's just how it goes. But no one really talks about how that affects the experience curve, because with 33% more soldiers and nearly 100% more enemies, the kill experience is disproportionately going up for my team. And also, the assist experience, which I'm not going to get into how experience works right now, but assist experience is doubled. And just flat out doubled and no qualifiers. Your soldiers level much faster in my campaign. We've all seen that. It's like July 1st in the campaign. I have almost nothing but lieutenants and up. I've got my first colonel. I'm on my way to my second one. So the experience needs to be nerfed. And I've done that in my mod setup. I've also run delayed force increase, which I should not have ran the way that I ran it. Its default configuration is like, I think 6 days slower than vanilla force level progression, which is a 33% slowdown. So on top of leveling up too fast, the force level's progressing far slower. And between the two of them, we have things like getting Supernova at force level 5, when normally rushing Supernova would be like force level 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that ballpark. So yeah, those two combined really, like, the nail in the coffin for the campaign is just how far ahead we are right now. And theoretically, I could, like, use console commands, rebuild my whole barracks, set the force level to 9 or something. Do the math to see what it actually should be at by vanilla, I guess. But it feels cleaner to restart and see what the early game should have looked like, especially because we were so reliant on our Pioneer, and though I don't think the Pioneer was a fault of the campaign being called so early, they were definitely overtuned as hell. I've installed a lot of mods to adjust them going to my next campaign as well. I've got Shield Rework, which removes their ablative health in exchange for armor and dodge. And that will mean they actually take wounds, whatever else it means that they will actually take wounds. I have I've nerfed the range on their incinerators down to 7 in all tiers. And you might think there's more issues than just having too much range and too much durability, but honestly, most of the other issues became an issue because they leveled up so quickly, as a factor of the experience problem being magnified by Sparks not getting fatigued and going on every assault that was available, which would normally be like 4 or 5 assaults per supply drop, but for us it was a minimum 6, almost always 7, 8, even 9 per 3 weeks. They were going on at least double, usually triple the number of missions as a normal soldier in the same time frame. Because normally you're supposed to be skipping these assaults, but with a bunch of Sparks to take up the manpower and not get tired and minimize the burden on us, we were able to go on so many missions, and the Sparks were going on all of them, leveling up at that increased pace, but twice as fast and just getting out of hand. Not as a factor of them being overpowered, but as a factor of them being over-leveled because of my mod setup. One last thing that really impacted just how well we were doing was the 2-trooper bug. These pods we were seeing of 2 troopers or a trooper and a stun lancer when the norm for the campaign is pods of like at least 5. And it turns out that the reason for that is because in a better advent, they're lowered down, they being troopers. Troopers are lowered down to 2 per group, with the expectation that you'll be seeing the specialist types instead of them. But that ends up not working for trooper-led pods, because troopers didn't get any new followers from a better advent. So they would be a trooper and a second trooper, or a trooper, a second trooper, and then a stun lancer once our force level got high enough. And in my mod setup, I fixed that. With rain enemies, I have gone in and added a bunch of followers to them from various enemy mods I'm using, including all the follower types from a better advent itself. And I think it's about time we started talking about what we're going to be using in the next campaign, what we're taking out, what we're adding in. On the subject of taking stuff out, I've covered most of what I'm taking out already. There are some cosmetics I never used, obviously, but that hardly matters. The notable things that are being removed that aren't mentioned in the mod video already would be a better campaign plus. I was using that for the bigger pods, but I ended up commenting out all of its changes for the story missions and running a golden path revamped instead so that they wouldn't be scripted. And I realized once I did that, I can just use Dynamic Alien as my force level for the biggest pods, and I don't need a better campaign plus anymore for anything. Another change that I've made is I'm cutting reliable wounds. Reliable wounds makes it so that the base XCOM thing where your wound times are pretty extremely random doesn't really happen anymore. Now they're going to be pretty consistent based on how much health you've lost. I'm not removing it outright, I'm replacing it with a very similar mod, Harsher Wounds. If I feel like I'm doing really well on troop roster, then I should just run a different mod that makes it more punishing when you take wounds that penalizes your troop roster a little bit. And one of the minor changes I've made in my mods is I removed the recruit card we got in our campaign that let me get so many troops so quickly, so easily. The main reason for that is because that's actually the reason we got so ahead on the soldier count. If you think that we were doing way too well on roster stuff as a result of anything to do with my changes, that's just untrue. We never really broke 50 troops, which is the base max for living space. And we never were anywhere close to running out of supplies, so we could obviously have just bought more soldiers. It wouldn't have been hard if we had started with less. That card is actually the reason we got so ahead so quickly on the troop roster game. And I think at this point, I actually need to open up the campaign list and talk about what's being added by going through Mod Manager. So let's finish up these pictures, see what else there's in here. It makes me a little bit sad scrolling through all of this, honestly. I would have liked to play this out the rest of the way, it's just so hard to imagine losing. I think I could lose the entire A-team and all of their gear and still win pretty easily. One thing I am cutting is I have cut the Exalt reskin. I'm going to let Mach X be their own thing. I like the idea of reskinning them to Exalt, but having played with it, I feel they're better off being independent of that identity. They're very meaningfully different. I like them more as Mach X than Exalt. Although I do really love all of their posters villainizing us. And after I finish talking about the mods, I'm going to put in everything I have at the end of this video for the supercut. It was originally going to be a video posted when the campaign ended, and it would be like 3 times longer than it is now, presumably. But seeing as the campaign's ending now, I'll throw it in at the end of this video. But first, let's go talk about what we're adding for the next campaign, because there's a lot. Coming over to the mod launcher, I have it sorted by when I've added things, and you can see that as of today, I have finally finished and posted my rain rebalance stuff onto the workshop. We're going to scroll down these past couple of weeks to when I stopped recording. I got very far ahead in recording, and I've just been uploading stuff that I recorded ahead of time while I worked on the mods. So, Alien Rulers, these primary actions on the 5th, is the last mod I added before I stopped recording for the campaign. These past 3 weeks, I've been uploading stuff I had pre-recorded a long time in advance. And I'm going to go up through all of this and talk about what all the new mods are and what they do. Shield Rework, I've mentioned a few times already, it fixes Pioneers. It can do other things, but I've mostly installed it to try to fix Pioneers by making them durable in a different way where they actually take wounds. Meaty abs is actually not a thing I care about at all, it's just become a prerequisite for a different cosmetic mod I've used, so I've installed it. Detailed Soldier List Redux by Rusty Diaz is a small improvement on the old soldier list that I was using. Next we have Biodivision, and above Biodivision there's just so many enemy mods. There are so many of them, what the hell happened? Well, the original reason that I didn't want to run more than a Just Better Advent in my campaign is because I knew they didn't play nice with each other, they being lots of enemy mods. Biodivision's the poster child for this, with their massively inflated spawn weights. They're great for a Biodivision campaign, but when you start trying to use them alongside other mods, they don't get on nice, they drown them out. However, once I had committed to making my own meta mods for my collection anyway, I realized, screw it, I'll just download every single enemy mod that I care about, that I particularly want to run, and I'll make them all play nice with each other, so that's what I did. We're going to have a lot more enemy mods, and the campaign's going to be a lot harder in the next campaign as a result of several of these. We've got Biodivision 2.0. It's a new enemy faction. They're going to show up about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 enemies. I'm not going to mention how often they show up. They all show up a proportionally rational amount of the time, because I've spent like a week digging through files, cross-referencing, and making sure they all showed up roughly similar amounts of time. Bitter Frost Protocol adds a new set of items and a status called Bitter Frost, where it builds up each time you apply it to somebody from chilled to more chilled to frozen. And this is neat and all, but I've installed it as a prerequisite for Frost Legion, which is the, Frost alternative to Biodivision, or in this case, they'll both be showing up. I've got Children of the King. This adds 4 more Viper Ruler type of enemies. They aren't quite rulers. I believe they have 3 actions like Chosen as opposed to ruler reactions. Mutant Harriers is a really cool expansion on the mutant enemies in the game. I feel like mutants in the base game are criminally underrepresented, so I love this. Harrier's Headgear is a cosmetic from that pack. Hero Gear is a cosmetic that I picked up. Enemy Within Mech Ports is cosmetic. Helmet Glass Fix, it has Fix in the name, why wasn't it already installed is honestly how I feel about every mod that says Fix. But yeah, it makes Helmet Glass look nicer. I've installed Loot Pinata's Light, and later on we're going to see I've installed Corpses Are Destroyed by Explosions. These 2 mods are a band-aid fix to the 8-man economy issues. What do I mean by that? In an 8-man game, you need more resources. You need more Illyrium, more supplies, and more alloys to build 33% more gear for your soldiers. Well, the supplies aren't a problem because you're getting double the number of corpses, so you're actually in such an obscene number of supplies that you can never use them all. But the alloys and the Illyrium, that's something you're going to have to change in mod settings. Loot Pinata's Light is going to give a small chance for any loot drops to have additional rolls for things like small amounts of alien alloys and Illyrium. I'm hoping that over the course of the campaign, it'll make up for the amount more that we need, and it'll feel like a good economy. And Corpses Destroyed by Explosions is the exact same thing, but inverted. We have too many supplies, and we're selling all these corpses. Let's remove some of them. And both of these things have positive impacts on the game, where you start playing more for loot and trying to avoid blowing people up like you did back in XCOM 2012. So I like both of these changes quite a lot individually, as well as for what they're trying to accomplish for the 8-man economy. Smooth Scrolling is the first mod where I just reinstalled a mod. I was trying to troubleshoot why my black market was lagging out. I never did find out, by the way. It's going to happen again, and I'm very upset about it. But this was previously installed and staying installed. Advent General Revamped adds not only more appropriately badass generals, it also adds honor guards. Originally, they could lead their own pods, but in my enemy setup, I've changed it so that they only ever show up as followers for generals. The Very Angry Sectopod and Return to the Space Egg from the 8th Dimension are both class mods that are designed to make the big threatening late-game enemies more threatening. In my opinion, they're actually far too threatening, so I've lowered their health substantially. It's 50 lower, and that might sound crazy because they had 50 health to lose. They're still at 50. They had 100 health by the original mod numbers. And as much as I appreciate how awesome that is, it's a little bit too much for me from a balanced campaign perspective, I think. Especially with all the other stuff they can show up alongside of. In a vacuum, I like the 100 health Sectopod, but then I imagine the 100 health Sectopod with 7 followers, and it's the 3rd pod I pulled this turn, and I'm just like, oh Christ, that's not gonna work. So they're still really threatening thanks to these mods, and I've still more than doubled the health of both Gatekeepers and Sectopods, but not to the degree that these mods do by baseline. Spectre Revamped makes Spectres way more terrifying. No longer can you just kill the Spectre to fix the Shadowbind. You gotta kill the Shadowbind. There's more changes than that, but that's the big one that's really, really scary. Purge Priest is an enemy mod. I didn't mention this with Frost Legion and Biodivision. By default, when leaders from those pods show up, they're not going to get followers from any other mod. It's just going to be a Frost pod or a Bio pod, and I didn't change that. I want it to work that way. I like the theme pods. Purge Priest worked like that by default, and I've kept them like that. As you get into the late game, we'll start getting pods of Purge Priest, which are not very priesty, honestly. They're sort of like the Inquisition. Very, very non-religious, not even that psionic as far as I can remember. Mostly just dangerous as hell and very cool. Speaking of, let's talk about the Berserker Omega. This is a boss tier enemy like a Sectopod. It's gonna be a nightmare. I don't know how it works, and I'll find out when I encounter it in the campaign, but I know it's very large with a lot of threatening abilities. I just don't recall them specifically at this moment. And my mod makes it even worse, because I add all the other modded mutons to its follower list, like these incredibly scary Harriers and the Frost mutons from Biodivision. So yeah, that's gonna be a nightmare. Oh, I should mention, even though I'm keeping a better Advent, I'm removing some stuff from a better Advent, including all the primes. We never saw those these campaign. We won too hard to get to Force level 10, let alone Force level 14 when the first primes show up. But Sectoid Commanders are going to be a replacement for the late game Sectoid primes, otherwise we wouldn't see late game Sectoids, and I don't want that. The Drome Dome applies a lot of different elemental variants to the Andromedons. It's just a cool thing to have. I like it. Black Ice Codexes adds a higher tier of Codex, and they're pretty scary and pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. Zoom your zombie animations. This was the start of new mods, I think, that came out after I stopped recording. There have been some pretty cool new mods very recently. Zoom your zombie animations gives the lost zombie animations to the risen zombies from Sectoids, which is really nice. Because I hate watching those guys slowly lumber around and waste my time. Really appreciate that. Lab's late game enemies adds Rift Keepers and Venators. Rift Keepers are higher tier gatekeepers designed to summon in enemies as opposed to be offensive themselves. And Venators are super high-end codexes that are designed to kill psionic soldiers more than anything else. Blinding Smoke is another awesome new mod. If you throw a smoke grenade at an enemy, it will apply a one-turn blind to them. That's just fucking awesome. I have no idea if I'm going to use that at any point in my campaign, but it's such a cool idea. And it also means that, like, you can use a smoke grenade defensively against a stun lancer that's run up to you. That's like an actual thing I can imagine doing if the stun lancer can't be dealt with. It's just blind him and put a smoke on top of the guy next to him and hope. This blinding smoke adds more depth to utility items, gives you more weird decisions to make. And more depth and more decisions is just like explicitly what I want out of my mods. As you can see, I've reinstalled Mach X. I was originally considering cutting it, decided not to, and I've kept Mach X, but I haven't kept it reskinned as Exalt. I've cut that. Suppressible targeting abilities is really, really nice. Now when you suppress somebody, the range of their AoE abilities gets dropped by 60%, and it stacks with a poison range reduction. This is really cool. That's how it worked in Long War 2012. I really like it. Any buff to suppression I always appreciate, especially when a de facto response to suppression is like, oh, I can't shoot, I'll spit poison on you. And I haven't really made the situation better if I've just told the Viper to poison me. Always Recruit and Rescue just forces recruit and rescue missions to appear as covert actions when they're available. Otherwise, you could just randomly not get the chance to have these happen pretty much all campaign, which sucks. This is the favorite mod I've installed, I'm gonna be honest. Like, screw all this important stuff I've done, all of my time spent modding these past few weeks. Nah, that was irrelevant. Custom soldier size. Make them big now. You want a soldier with the codename Big Large who's literally 20% taller than everyone else? You can have it. You want to name somebody Small Potatoes and make them way shorter? Go for it. I've done those things. That's not a hypothetical situation. Those are in the character pool. We're going to see them. But I absolutely love this. Mostly I've just randomly moved everyone 2 to 3 notches up or down on the slider. So there's height differences between our soldiers. But I just really like this. I've also used it to make all Sparks 5 notches lower because, you know, they're kind of enormous to the point that it's inconvenient to look at them. I've installed alternate bleed up mechanics. This is a really good mod. I never knew what it did. I just didn't get it for some reason. It's just awesome. I don't know why I never read what it did. Now, the more overkill damage you take, the more likely you are to die. So if you get hit for 5 and you had 5, you're very likely to live. If you had 1 and you get hit for 5, you're probably not going to make it. Harsh consistent wound times we've talked about. Less annoying dark events is a Grim Horizon fix. It's titled in a way that doesn't make it sound like that, but it changes these mods where intel costs double forever, or scanning time is 66% longer forever, to be more bearable when they become permanent. Whiplash Overhaul makes Whiplash for skirmishers a cooldown-based ability. And in my Skirmisher rework, I have Whiplash in the cooldown-centric, grappling-centric tree, so it just makes sense to have the Whiplash overhaul to make it fit in more nicely. Also, I just dislike charge-based abilities. I don't care about game balance. If it's not a grenade that physically goes away after I use it, it shouldn't have a number of charges. And with some things I've accepted you can't balance it like that. There's no cooldown you put on Banish where it starts being okay. But as far as I can, I want to remove every charge-based ability there is. Proximity Mine Proving Ground Project is just a mod I didn't know existed. It's what it says on the tin. There's a Proving Ground project for Proximity Mines now. Reinforced Underlay Plus changes the health you get from the Vest Breakthrough to give you a Blade of Health instead so that it's not garbage. Don't pull that trigger as a fix for the Warlock. What'll happen very frequently is he'll make a zombie that's about to explode next to you when it takes damage, and then the civilians trying to help you in the terror mission will shoot the zombie and kill your soldier. This gets rid of that. And no reaction fire slow-mo gets rid of the reaction fire slow-mo. It's another new mod. I'm very happy to see it. Very glad about it. It's not new, I'm lying. It's a year old almost exactly, I just didn't know about it. Well, now we've got it and it'll make my campaign better. Quieter Warlock Skills is a skill that makes the Warlock scream a little bit less loudly. I've also installed Spark Heist. I think this is a nice middle ground. Spark Heist will give us a covert infiltration chain to steal a spark from Advent. It will not show up if you can't build sparks, it will not show up if you're currently building a spark, and it won't show up if you have more than 2 sparks. If you have a 3rd spark, this never generates. And I really like that. I like that it sort of gives you a clear, good covert operation to demand your attention, and simultaneously, it's also never going to give you like an obscene number of sparks. It's not going to help you get them that much faster. It just fits into the game nicely. I talked about powered armor rigging earlier when I was talking about how I really shouldn't have been running the extra utility slots mod. I should have been running something like this instead, and now I'm doing that. Steel Guardian was a champion, and he didn't deserve to go out the way he did, and his voice pack was called Rizzo. Actually, it was called The Rizzo. This mod removes his voice pack. Because it was terrible. It was the worst thing I've ever heard. It's audio terrorism, and I need it to be gone. The covert operative outfits are great and all, but I don't use unarmored soldiers. I want my soldiers to look like they're armored, and as a consequence, I didn't have it installed before. However, one of my mods updated, now it requires it, so now I'm running it. Iradar's Immolator Overhaul just gives a better set of cosmetics for the Immolators. It also gives a tier 0 Immolator that looks a little bit junkier like the rest of your tier 1 gear. You can upgrade out of it pretty fast, pretty easily. So really it's just like a slight pioneer tax, which is fine by me. I just like the way they look more. That's the extent of this being here. I'm going to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what improved weapon upgrade UI does. But I trust Rusty Dios a lot. And I've had a lot of experiences where I've been upgrading a weapon and I've thought the UI was bad in various different ways, so hopefully it helps in one of them. As you can see, I added the Hive a lot later than most of my other enemy mods. I went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to run it over and over again. Eventually I settled on getting rid of the ABA Chrysalids and running the Hive. It's a good Chrysalid overhaul mod, adds some cool stuff to the campaign, looking forward to it. Revert Overwatch rules change is an interesting one. I don't actually like what this mod does. When World of the Chosen got released, or maybe it was in a patch at some point in time, I don't know, the way Overwatches worked changed. Previously, if you walked one tile within Overwatch range, you wouldn't trigger it. Which also meant that if you were at the edge of vision and left vision, whether that means going from the edge of line of sight backwards or around a corner from wherever you were within line of sight, whatever you did, if you broke vision within your first tile of movement, you'd be safe. Back in XCOM 2012, if this happened, you wouldn't get your Overwatch either. But it would hang, pretend you were going to get your Overwatch, and then waste it. So they did fix that part of it, but it still kept working that way in XCOM 2. And then there was a patch that changed it so that it would go off in those circumstances. However, what they didn't fix was the indicator for it. The game still tells you that it's not going to pull the Overwatch if you end up doing any of those things. And you don't realize you're doing them most of the time. You're just like, oh, hey, I'm not going to pull an Overwatch, great. And then you do it and you get shot immediately. So the real reason I want this mod isn't because it's changing the gameplay in a way that I view as better, it's because it's fixing a UI bug by changing the gameplay to match it. Heavy weapon tweaks should have already been installed. My current plan with heavy weapons is build them until you get Shredstorm Cannon and ignore everything else because they all suck. And now, it turns out there's like some arguments for the other ones. I'm still going to build Shredstorm Cannons, but it's not going to feel as bad to use other heavy weapons, and they're not just clearly worse in every conceivable way anymore, so that's really nice. Cannon Animation Redux, as well as Get a Rifle Grip up here, are just mods that give you slightly better animations for some of the weapons. More traits. what it says on the tin, there are more traits now. And also, you've got a 20% chance to spawn with a negative or positive trait the moment a soldier is generated now. I believe I actually already had this, and I don't know why it's up here. I must have reinstalled it, but I can't imagine why. Hero Armor Equality is a mod that helps me with one of the main reasons I like the extra item slot mods, is because Reapers don't get item slots, and it feels like they should have them, so this will fix that. It's not going to give Reapers the same number of item slots as other classes. What it's going to do is it's going to give hero classes the extra item slot from going up in a tier, like how you have an item slot at Predator that none of them get. Priest Revamped is an expansion on the Priest abilities. Honestly, because it gives them more abilities that are not stasis and mind control, I think it's a nerf to Priest. They've got more they can do and they're more interesting units, but frankly, they're less threatening. I'm okay with that. I don't mind that they're less threatening. I like that they have more to do, that they're more interesting. I went back and forth on this one a lot. As you can tell, I'm still kind of conflicted. Commander Avatar Restorations gives you a unique model for the avatar in the end of the game. Exoskeletons for TLP armors is not going to affect us at all because we're not playing with TLP armors, really. But clean full body armors is going to affect us. You know how everyone clipped all the time when I put on Disguises or the Scavenged armor? I don't know what I thought clean full body armors was, but it turns out that when you put all those armors, this makes all your limbs invisible so you don't clip. And I really want this mod to fix that. Titanfall 2 Scourge is another set of Spark cosmetics. I've installed it just like all the other Titanfall Sparks. Yet again, more perks. Molotovs by Iridar is a tier 0 grenade alternative. It doesn't go as far, it doesn't bounce, and instead of exploding, it's a fire that deals less damage and inflicts burning guaranteed. It's predominantly meant as an anti-loss tool, but it's nice to have an alternative thing to consider in the early game, and the big one is since Frost Legion is actually specifically vulnerable to fire, is it has a really clear point in the early game if in the early days we see like a Frost Legion sit rep. Because I'm not going to be dropping plasma grenades for Molotovs, that's unreasonable, but frag grenades for Molotovs versus Frost Legion sit rep, that sounds like something that actually is a really cool little bit of depth to add to the game. Instant tooltips is what it says on the 10, and I'm ashamed it wasn't already installed. Multiple sit reps, what does this do? All of these mods I'm adding, lots of them add sit reps. There are Drome Dome sit reps, Bio sit reps, Frost sit reps, Hive sit reps, the list goes on. There's 400 mods, there's a lot of new sit reps. I've got it configured to give me 3 75% chances at a sit rep on every mission. That way, I'll see more sit reps in a campaign, and there's less of a chance that I go a whole campaign and I basically see no specific Frost Legion missions. Purge Priest Cosmetics just gives you the dope-ass outfits worn by the Purge Priest. Stench Fury armors and cap and buffs are already installed, but there are 2022 versions of them by Max that have had the cosmetics cooked, so I've replaced them. Variable force level is our replacement for delayed force level. I've got it configured to slow the force level progression by only about 12 hours. On any individual level, you're not going to notice it, but as we get to the end of the campaign and we're approaching force level 19 and 20, it's going to be like a 10-day delay at the very end of the game for those super late game things, and that is a meaningful difference that I really think should be there because it's so much more dangerous at our late game than it used to be. But it doesn't just do that, it also gives you a random chance that I configured to be 48 hours plus or minus to happen earlier or later. And I just really appreciate that as well, otherwise I can literally just write out a spreadsheet of when the force level increases and when timings matter. XCOM flag adds an XCOM nationality. Previously I had all the nationalities set to be the XCOM flag, but I decided that I'd rather have the character pool be set so that it was just all of my characters specifically had the XCOM flag. And I've also changed all their backstories to redacted and gotten rid of mods like backstories, or more backstories and birth dates. Because I wasn't using them. This feels like a better way of going about it. It's super minor and not really important. Quick Draw sensitivity makes Quick Draw work with more abilities like it probably should. Corpse Drops Revamped makes things a little bit easier to see. Down here you can't see it, it's so teeny tiny. It color codes the UI information that you're getting when you kill things, making it a little bit easier to tell what's going on, because so often you just see a bunch of white pop up in the bottom right and you don't really pay attention to it. Suppression Plus is a mod I'm not going to talk about because honestly, compared to what I've already added to make Suppression stronger, I shouldn't have this. The classes that won't Suppression have perks to give what that gives already, so I don't want to change it in any way from here. Mind-controlled soldiers bleed out. Something you hate in the base game to see is sometimes your soldier gets mind-controlled, and what are you going to do about it other than let him kill one of your guys while you set up a 2-turn solution for the sectoid? Well, now you're going to shoot the man. I mean, you don't want to, but if you kill a mind-controlled soldier, they will always bleed out now. And I appreciate that change. Overwatch Lost Headshots lets you get headshot kills on Overwatch, which makes Overwatch no longer seem like a complete waste of time, just suboptimal. Damage calculation tweaks. Previously, your ablative health went first, then your armor applied to your health. Now your armor applies to your ablative health, and then your health once you're out of ablative health. It also means that when you have ablative health, your armor can still be shredded. This just makes more sense. It might mess with the damage calculations a little bit when I'm hovering over enemies, but I'll live. Skull Ouch straight to the dome is a fix. It just makes it ignore shields and armor when you use the Skulljack, because why shouldn't it? Suppression for suppression stops the nonsense minigame of you get suppressed, so you suppress them back, both for you and the aliens. Less Unconscious War of the Chosen replaces all of the things that can roll unconsciousness in the base game with an additional chance to roll a stun, because unconsciousness is kind of just a nonsense mechanic that is completely unreasonable, especially when you remove Revival Protocol from the game. Between the Eyes Extended is just a neat mod that makes Between the Eyes apply to Lost, Bio-Lost, and Summoned Zombies by various side operatives. It's a buff to XCOM, but it's just a really appropriate buff that I think is lore accurate and feels good. To my enormous shame, I didn't have the proficiency plugin for MachX installed when I was playing. Whoops. Expanded Continent bonus just increases the number of cards that can spawn as continent bonuses. Feels like that's fine to me. Just adds more diversity, makes things feel less rigged to be a certain way and more random. Iron Sights by Eridar is just a new mod that adds iron sights to guns that don't have scopes because, well, what else would you have? You need to aim it, don't you? Lifetime Stat Redux. Same thing as previously, Rusty Diaz has updated a mod I was using already, so I'll gladly use the new marginally improved version. Unrestricted Codex Spawning by Charmed is like my favorite mod that I didn't know existed. It's 5 years old, I have no excuse. Now, Codex sources will just spawn when you get to the appropriate force level. The game doesn't care if you intentionally ignore the story missions, you still have to fight Codexes, you don't get to tell it no. They're gonna show up when it's appropriate. It doesn't matter if you do the story objective, they're just an enemy in the list now. Explosive Destroyed Corpses we already talked about as a band-aid solution to the supply influx you get from an 8-man campaign. Don't Move a Muscle is a hunter rework and it's really well designed. The assassin forces you to slow down and try to catch her and scan tiles for her. The warlock will summon zombies and force you to deal with them. The hunter makes you move forward. He actually completely fails to slow you down the way the other chosen are slowing you down. So now, Tracking Shot will hit you if you move, as opposed to if you stay still. It actually slows you down and messes with your plans like the other two do. And also, instead of inflicting bleeding and killing you when his goal is to capture your soldiers, like the other two chosen, now he inflicts dazed instead of bleeding. And yeah, that would be nice. That would be really nice. That just makes sense. Because right now the hunter is the most lethal chosen. He's got the least threatening abilities, to be honest, but he'll just shoot you for your entire health bar and inflict bleed on top of it. What are you gonna do about it? And this fixes that in a way that makes so much sense I can't say no to it. Leviathan Extended Squad Size is a mod I've reinstalled, pretty much the same as it previously was, which brings us to today. I've finally done enough checking to see that my mods are working, that I'm willing to actually post them to the Nexus. Not the Nexus, we use the workshop for this game. But I posted my mods to the workshop. They don't appear to be throwing red screens, though it's entirely possible that I've missed one somewhere. I'm pretty sure everything works, I'm pretty sure everything does what I want it to do, and I'm pretty sure I'm ready to start another campaign. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling about mods. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to leave you with the supercut, and I'm going to get out of here.